Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome. The time is now 4:02 p.m. and I would like to call the November 14th, 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council to order. Mr. Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Kent Howe,
Here.
Cindy Condon,
Here.
Ann Byer,
Here.
Richard Devlin,
Here.
Katie Imes.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agenda modifications?
Mr. Chair, there are no agenda modifications at this time.
Okay, well, I have the following announcements. For council members and anyone addressing the council, please remember to state your name clearly and please do not use the speakerphone feature as it will create feedback. Please mute your phones, and if you're joining us by phone and receive a phone call, please hang up from this call and dial back in after finishing your other call. For those signed on to the webinar, please do not broadcast your webcam. For tonight's public hearing and public comment period, there are 3 ways to let us know you're interested in providing comments to the council. For those in person, please fill out a registration card and submit to Nancy Hatch. For those using the WebEx, you'll need to use the raise your hand feature. For those on the phone only, you'll need to press *3, which will alert us that you want to speak. And we'll go over these options again during those agenda items. If you want to receive future email notifications of council meetings, project milestones, or rulemakings through our Click Dimensions program, you can do so by clicking on the link in the agenda or on the council webpage. Look for the green box on the right-hand side of the page that says sign up for emails updates. You're also welcome to access the online project mapping tool and any documents by visiting our website. Please note that the audio and video of this meeting is being recorded and may be posted to the council's website following the meeting. Energy Facility Council meetings shall be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner where everyone is allowed to state their positions at the appropriate times consistent with council rules and procedures. Willful accusatory, offensive, insulting, threatening, insolent, or slanderous comments which disrupt the council meeting are not acceptable. Pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 345-011-0080, any person who engages in unacceptable conduct which disrupts the meeting may be expelled. So we'll move to the consent calendar, and the first item is approval of the minutes of September 19th and 20th, 2024 meeting. Do we have a motion?
Chair Hunt?
Yes, Councilor Byer.
Just for the record, I was not in attendance on the first day of the meetings. I was in attendance on the second, but I did listen to the tapes for both. So I would offer a motion to approve the minutes of the September meeting.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilor Devlin seconded. So we've got a motion and a second. Secretary Cornett, could you please call the roll?
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Kent Howe,
Yes.
Richard Devlin,
Yes.
Katie Imes,
Yes.
Cindy Condon. Yes. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Could you give us the secretary report,
Yes.
please?
The first thing I want to do is share with council members that we got a plaque for former council member Perry Chalktoot. So I shared it with those who are in the room so you could take a look at it. I don't know if I'm on the screen, but if I'm on the screen, basically it's in the shape of the state of Oregon, and I will just read it so it's in the record. Perry Chalktoot, council member, in grateful appreciation for your service and dedication to the state of Oregon on the Energy Facility Siting Council from March 2021 through August 2024. And there's a quote, "We don't have to engage in grand heroic actions to participate in the process of changes. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world." Howard Zinn. So we will next week send this to Perry and send him our well wishes.
Yeah, thanks to the staff for doing that. We appreciate it.
Next, I have several project updates. The first, we have several amendment determination requests. So two of them I had talked about at the last council meeting. So the first one is the Boardman Hemingway transmission line. And the second is the Daybreak Solar Project. So I gave an update on those, that we've received those on both those projects. And I won't necessarily going into the details of those, but I had thought in October that we might have those done and to council so that you could see them and determine if you agreed with them or if you wanted to review them at a future council meeting. Neither one of those are quite ready yet. So we do anticipate getting those done soon. So probably at the December meeting. So be looking for those. We will send those by email to you in advance. And then we did receive just shortly after the last council meeting another amendment determination request on the Wagon Trail Solar Project. So as you recall, council approved that site certificate in September, and it is a 500 megawatt solar PV generating project in Morrow County. The request seeks review of a proposed change in the battery energy storage system. So this would change up to 15 megawatts of that battery energy storage system from lithium ion to zinc bromide electrolyte. So, there is several variations of battery storage and, how those components work. So they're looking at potentially doing a slightly different one. It should be less impactful. That's the argument that they're making, and therefore an amendment is not triggered. So zinc bromide electrolyte is fully recyclable within the existing system and does not require heating, ventilation, or air conditioning, reducing auxiliary load and operational noise. So, oftentimes the certificate or applicants will request more than sometimes they actually, intend or think, could be ultimately built. And as long as things are smaller than or less impactful, that is likely that it won't trigger an amendment. But if there is something that is bigger, more impactful, something that's significant that council hasn't reviewed, that's where the amendments get triggered. So in the amendment determination request process, that's what we look at is, could a condition be changed or a new condition be required? Could there be a resource that wasn't evaluated under this sort of new thing be impacted, even if it wouldn't justify a new condition? So those are the things that we have to look at. So on its face, this seems like it's less, but we haven't done the evaluation yet.
Cheryl,
Vice Chair Condon.
just a quick question. Would it be possible, just as these technologies change, and I know staff probably knows a whole lot more about it and reviews it, but for us to get just background information, what people are saying about zinc bromide?
Oh, you mean on just battery storage technology? Sure.
Kind of understand what
Yep.
underlies the changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are, and those are just two of, there are more types of battery energy storage. So I think that's a pretty dynamic industry and sector right now. And I think we're going to see some changes in that. We, as you're well aware of, council has approved with most of the relatively new projects, battery storage components associated with those. But there hasn't really been a lot of construction of battery yet. So even though you've reviewed a lot of them, there hasn't actually been a lot of construction of them. So I think that is still, there's just a lot of changes occurring in that sort of sector.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. We absolutely will make a note of that and put that on the list for future. Yep. Good. Got the right slide. So on the screen is the 2025 Biennial Energy Report. This has recently been published, and the screen's a little bit small. You can probably see it when, if you're remoting into the meeting a little bit better. But if you go into the Department of Energy's webpage, just the landing page, you can see there's a link for the Biennial Energy Report. And it is a little small here, but you've got the 2025 one. It also has the prior versions as well, the links to those. So they're all available on there. For those who are less familiar with the biennial energy report, I will read a portion of the executive summary. So, and it states, in 2017, the Oregon Department of Energy introduced House Bill 2343 to the legislature. The bill charged the department with developing a new biennial energy report to inform local, state, regional, and federal energy policy development and energy planning and investments. The report, based on analysis of data and information collected and compiled by the Oregon Department of Energy, provides a comprehensive review of energy resources, policies, trends, and forecasts, and what they mean for Oregon. So as its name, biennial, it's every 2 years, and it's, about this time, late October. I don't remember exactly what the date is, either late October, early November.
We can't hear you online, just so you know.
I don't know if I can hear you, but I can't hear them either.
Yeah, something happened there.
Okay. Did you text them or?
I can. I'll text Todd.
This year is substantially smaller than it has been in prior years.
Okay.
So I know what you're talking about. I'll look into that. I'm not sure that there was a different, smaller version created just because the entire thing is a lot smaller this year.
Entire thing's fine with me, but I just remember that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Next slide, please, Nancy. While that's being worked on, the next council meeting is December 12th and 13th, just like this month, because of holidays, later in the month. That will occur earlier in the month. So we won't need the 12th, the Thursday, but we will need the 13th, so Friday. We've already submitted a request to Chair Howe for the meeting with the agenda items. Several of them are annual or biannual, kind of typical ones. The annual election of officers. We're looking at the financial assurance forms and banking institutions. And yeah, a couple of things like, oh yeah, we also have the fee schedule that has to happen every 2 years. So the fee schedule is going to be in front of you as well. So some of those things, we do have some other things as well, but that will be in on December 13th, the Friday in Salem at our office.
Counselor Byer.
Just a question, knowing that we're going into the long legislative session, does the department have a policy option package, or has the department submitted anything that will influence this body going forward?
The one thing that we have done, most of the policy option packages that have been proposed by the Department of Energy are personnel. And we have one for a compliance officer. So we have 2 full-time compliance officers. We have a policy option package for a 3rd one. So that's probably the biggest thing from at least the department's policy option packages. There will no doubt be a lot of bills related to the authority and the work of the council, whether it be transmission or solar or jurisdiction on federal lands. I think it'll be a busy session for kind of FSEC related ideas. but none from us on that.
Thank you.
So on the screen, Nancy had sent out to all council members, potential 2025 dates. So these are the dates that, I think everybody landed on, and I don't know if everybody was available on every set of those dates, but enough to justify a quorum. So, just making sure that everybody's aware of those dates so you can put them on a calendar. And just as a reminder for everybody, that doesn't mean we're going to hold meetings on 2 days on every month. These are just calendar holds for making sure that, people are going to be available so that we can conduct business. As happens, about 5 weeks out, we determine if we actually need a council meeting, whether it's, a public hearing on the Thursday evening and then a regular council meeting on Friday. We then, seek that from the chair to determine, is that a right agenda? Is that the right location? And if we do, then we let everybody know the dates and the times and everything. And if not, we let you know that, you can release that from your calendar. So again, not a guarantee that we're going to have all of these meetings, but these are the placeholder dates. And we'll confirm these or release them about 5 weeks out. So if anybody has any, significant concerns or issues on these that you haven't already conveyed to Nancy, please let us know. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Cornett. The next item is a Sunstone Solar Project application for site certificate, proposed order review, possible material change hearing, and public notice of possible hearing to adopt the final order. It's an action item, and we have Christopher Clark, Senior Siting Analyst, that'll present this item. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Howe, council members. As the chair mentioned, my name is Chris Clark. I'm a senior siting analyst with Odo, and I'm here to walk the council through your final decision possible final decision on the application for site certificate for Sunstone and the proposed order. Nancy, if I could get the first slide. Before I turn things over for your deliberations, I'm going to go through a quick procedural history of this project, give an overview of the proposed facility, its location, and the applicant. And then I'll review the changes that we made in the proposed order based on comments provided on the public record, review and agency consultation, and the council's review. And then I'll turn it over to you all for an opportunity to approve, reject, or modify the proposed order as your final order. And then just as a reminder, if you do make substantive changes to the proposed order, you will be required to give the applicant team an opportunity to provide comment. Next slide, thank you. So we are at the final point of this proceeding. That process began back in May of 2022 with the submission of the notice of intent and the issuance of the project order in September of that same year. We received the preliminary application on the site certificate on August 8th, 2023, and conducted a completeness review in coordination with state and local governments, reviewing agencies, and tribal governments. And after 2 rounds of requests for additional information, the preliminary application was determined to be complete on May 10th, 2024. We issued a public notice on that complete application on May 21st, and then had an informational meeting in Boardman on June 5th. In July, we issued the draft proposed order and issued a public notice, which initiated a 41-day comment period that ended at the public hearing at your meeting in Hermiston in August, on August 23rd. And then the council reviewed the draft proposed order, the public comments provided on the record of the public hearing, and the applicant's responses to public comments at your September meeting in Clatskanie. So since then, we issued the proposed order on October 8th and issued a public notice establishing November 7th, 2024 as the deadline for petitions to participate in the contested case. No petitions were received, and the hearing officer issued an order concluding the contested case on November 8th, and I understand that the council received that in your packet earlier this week. Great. Great. So that brings us to tonight, which is, again, the last step in the process where the council will have the opportunity to decide whether to adopt, modify, or reject the proposed order, and then give direction to the department on preparation of the final order reflecting your final decision. And if you approve the application, a site certificate will be issued. So as a very brief refresher, this project is being proposed by Sunstone Solar LLC, which is a subsidiary of Pine Gate Renewables LLC. There's several members representing the applicant team in the audience tonight. The proposed energy facility is a 1,200 megawatt solar photovoltaic power generation facility that would occupy up to 9,442 acres within a 10,960 acre site. In addition to solar arrays, the applicant proposes to construct related and supporting facilities, including a battery energy storage system with up to 7,200 megawatt hours of discharge capacity. Since it just came up, I'll note that the applicant has requested to have the flexibility to use either lithium ion or zinc-based chemistry for that battery energy storage system. In addition, there'd be up to 6 collector substations, overhead 230 kV transmission lines connecting the substations to the point of interconnect at the northeast corner of the site, up to 4 operations and maintenance buildings, laydown yards, access roads, and other kind of normal supporting infrastructure. As you can see on the map, the site is in Morrow County, just southwest of the Boardman bombing range, and all the land in the site is private land zoned for exclusive farm use. So on the record of the public hearing, the council received 28 public comments in writing, including written comments from the applicant regarding their request for an exception to statewide planning goal 3, which I'll go over in a moment. The applicant and 8 other persons provided oral testimony at the hearing as well. And then the council received the applicant's responses to comments on August 29th. We've included a summary of all the major issues raised in comments in the proposed order, but I did want to go over them on a high level here. The comments that did not result in recommended changes to the DPO are shown on this slide kind of at a high level summary. Those included multiple comments providing general support for the project, including support for the general economic benefits and economic opportunities that the commenters believed would be generated by construction and operation of the proposed facility. We had comments supporting the noxious weed control plan and the road use plans provided in the application. And the county also reiterated its position that the state has primary responsibility to enforce the noxious weed plan required under the site certificate. And then we received a comment from the operator of the GTN pipeline, which crosses through the site, requesting that the certificate holder coordinate with them on right-of-way access issues. So I won't go over those comments anymore, but if there are any questions, just interrupt me. For the comments that resulted in recommended changes in the DPO, I'll go over these in a little bit more detail, but just in brief, we received comments from the applicant and the county requesting that the recommended denial of the local economic benefits reason supporting the applicant's exception request be reversed. We received a request from the county, from Morrow County, to require that the outcomes of the workforce housing plan proposed by the applicant be reported. We received a comment that raising some safety issues and concerns related to the use of lithium ion batteries at the site. And then we received a request from Morrow County that there be with local emergency management officials on the wildfire mitigation plan. So again, I'll go over all these in a little bit more detail in a moment and show you the kind of red line of the conditions where we had that. So The proposed order does not contain substantive changes in sections associated with most of the council standards. And as a result, I don't have anything prepared tonight to go over those standards. As you can see, they're all on the slide. So I just did want to say, if there is a question, please feel free to ask it on any of these standards, and I'll do my best to answer. Also, that's something you all can talk about in your deliberation as well. But hearing none, I'll go to the first kind of issue that we looked at, which was the goal
Mr. Chair, may I
3
interrupt?
exception request.
Counselor Devlin?
Yes, it's just a request to Nancy. I've been attempting a second connection, but I haven't been let in.
I don't see you on the participant list.
I'll try again.
Thank you.
His other computer.
He's not showing up.
Please proceed. I'm trying to reconnect again. This is not my primary connection. It's a secondary one. I still have the primary.
Go ahead. Okay, Councilmember Devlin, please stop me if you need the pause. But okay, so as I mentioned in the DPO comments, both the applicant and Morrow County took issue with the department's recommended denial of the local economic benefits reason supporting the applicant's Goal 3 exception request. As you'll remember from previous presentations, the proposed facility needs an exception to Goal 3 because almost all of the land that would be occupied by the proposed facility is arable, and there's also a large portion of the site that is considered high-value farmland because of existing water rights. Most of that land is currently in dry land wheat production. And as the LCDC rules and the implementing ordinances in the Morrow County zoning ordinance state, any facility that uses more than 12 acres of high-value farmland or 20 acres of arable land requires a Goal 3 exception currently. So the exception is specifically related to those acreage thresholds. The applicant is pursuing a reasons exception, which means that to grant land use approval, the council must find that 1, reasons justify why the state policy embedded in Goal 3 should not apply. And Goal 3, again, is the goal protecting farmland. The council must find that the significant environmental, economic, social, and energy consequences anticipated as a result of the facility have been identified, and that adverse impacts will be mitigated in accordance with council rules, and that the proposed facility is compatible with other adjacent uses or will be made compatible through measures designed to reduce adverse impacts. The applicant provided 6 reasons to support its request that are shown on the screen. Those included locational dependence, lack of impacts to irrigated agriculture, and the preservation of water supply for other users in the Butter Creek critical groundwater area, the creation of local economic benefits, minimal impacts to other resources protected by council standards, and responsiveness to state and local goals and priorities. The draft proposed order recommended the council approve the exception request based on 3 of those reasons: locational dependence, minimal impacts to irrigated crops, and minimal impacts to other resources. And those are asterisked on this slide. And in the next slide, so the DPO also recommended that the other reasons, including the local economic benefits reason, be rejected. And then there is an agricultural mitigation plan proposed to support the local economic benefits reason, which the DPO recommended be considered as mitigation for impacts under the environmental economic, social, and energy consequences prong of the exception standards rather than a reason itself. And then the applicant and county disagreed with that reasoning, asserting that the benefits of the plan would go beyond mitigation and would result in a net economic benefit, and that the denial was inconsistent with other council decisions. And so, well, I'll give a getting ahead of myself, but yeah. So when we brought this to you last month, we went over that, and the council essentially agreed that there was sufficient evidence to say that there was an economic benefit, and recommended that we recommended that we reverse the decision. And so that was the final outcome. I do have more background on the mitigation plan. I don't know if any of the council members would like me to go back over that again.
Counselor Byer.
So just for the record, I think that what council has done here is sort of set and put some definition on this standard for the reasons exception and what is expected of other applicants moving forward. I know we talked about this long and hard, but I think that this sets some parameters on what the council will accept as a reasons exception. So thank you for being so willing to work with all the parties to come up with this new way of looking at this. So thank you.
Secretary Cornett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Todd Cornett. And just as an update to council, if you recall, we've created a goal exception memo, for the benefit of developers. So with this new information, and primarily Councilor Rowe is taking the first crack at making an update to that, and and then staff will take a look at that, and then also make our own changes to that. But it's really to reflect, as we get further and evaluate these things, and want to reflect, the choices that are made by the council. Again, it's not a directive, you must do this, because reasons exception, every applicant has to justify their reasons. But, the things that council would accept or wouldn't accept based upon kind of, past decisions, we want to make those changes to that memo as well. So that's being worked on right now.
Vice Chair Condon.
Thank you. I probably should have asked this last time we discussed it, but what's the advantage of having more than 3 for the reasons exception? Yeah, I'm not as familiar with land use.
So if you look at I don't know if the language is on there, it's basically reasons plural. So it can't be 1.
Right,
It has to be at least 2.
right.
And then really it's the combination of those. I mean, somebody could have 2 and those could be entirely adequate to justify a goal exception. Somebody could have 5 and that's not quite adequate enough. I mean, I don't have any examples, but it's really, the combination of those reasons. So, I mean, theoretically, the more you put in, the better kind of advantages you have, but it's not simply, you have to have 3 or you have to have 4, or you have to have 5. It's really the nature of the reasons that you're making the argument for. And the combination of those justify the goal exception.
Right. I understand that. It's that once we found the 3, or more than 1 reason, then what's the advantage to having 5, to saying, no, we want that as a.
Again, I think it's safe harbor. So if they have the information that's available, why not put it in there to help justify it?
Okay, thank you.
But I mean, I think the answer to your question is probably best not answered by me. It would be by the developers themselves.
And then, Mr. Clark, I had a question regarding the water challenged aspect of the site, that it wouldn't impact nearby irrigation for crop land. Is that kind of being dropped, or is that one kind of part of the locational dependency?
Thank you, Chair Howe. There's no changes to our finding related to the water challenged land reason from the DPO to the proposed order. My understanding is that, and I would need to go back to look exactly at the language, but there's an active water right for around 3,000 acres within the site, but because it's in the Butter Creek critical groundwater
Right.
area, allocations have been low. It's very economically challenging to install the infrastructure that would be needed to use the full allocation. And so the department did recommend that the council grant that reason, primarily just because even though there is a water right, it's not economically feasible to really use it.
So does it become a fourth reason?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's not just three reasons now, there's four.
Yeah.
And I guess to address Vice Chair Condon's comment, there's no real legal effect of granting this additional reason because the recommendation was to approve the exception request. So it's not like a better exception, but it may be a more well-rounded one.
Just,
Counselor Byer?
I think on water rights, that we need to be a little careful about whether or not it's economically viable to use the water right. That gets us into issues that, we can always argue that something's not economically viable in a given scenario. So I think in this case, it was more than it wasn't economically viable. It was also not legally available to the landowners. I think you did some additional research on that, on the whole Butter Creek critical groundwater area. And I think there's information in the record from Water Resources, if I'm right.
That is correct. There is additional, and I'd say it's very complicated.
Yes, yes.
The landowners have been obtaining authorization to use up to 500 acre feet of water per year for irrigation.
Yeah.
According to the landowners, that's not enough to make it economically feasible to
Right.
install the infrastructure. I believe there is a question on, since they are the senior water right holder in that sub area of the critical groundwater area, if they were to use more water, they could potentially be entitled to a larger allocation, but that is questionable. And then the overall sustainability of the aquifer there is also a big concern. So I think I think it's a complicated issue. I think the characterization of it being in a water challenged area is partially because there are challenging circumstances with using water. This water right could not be transferred somewhere else,
Right.
partially because of its location in the critical groundwater area, partially because of the lack of current use of the water. So I think there's a lot going on there. If you want me to bring that portion of the DP or the proposed order up, I can. But yeah, it is you are correct, Councilmember Byron. Thank you for bringing up that it was more than that. It wasn't just economically viable for the landowners to use the water. There's a larger circumstance there.
Yeah, and so I would just, again, for the record, make it clear that as we address issues of water rights and water use, it is complex. It is not a one-size-fits-all kind of decision. And that each of these reasons, exceptions will require us to look at the particular scenario. And again, kudos to staff for digging in on this one because it was pretty complex. So thank you.
Counselor Imes?
Thank you, Chair Howe. Mr. Clark, could you refresh our memory and elaborate a little bit on the comments that were made by Morrow County about the that this was inconsistent with other council decisions.
Thank you, Councilmember Imes. Yes, and I will, I don't have at top of mind all of the different orders they had cited. I think the most clearer one was that they cited to what was then a pending decision on Wagon Trail, where the council had granted the economic benefits reason for a very similar scheme of agricultural mitigation plan, which maybe had a different kind of name to it, but was a similar economic analysis and similar sort of mitigation strategy or compensation strategy. There were other more historic decisions where council, I think, had weighed the other types of economic benefits, like tax benefits or even lease payments slightly differently. I'd have to go back kind of and look at the record to really bring those up. But I think the crux of the county's comments were just that there had been other council decisions where the council had granted this reason, where there was maybe less of a demonstration of a net economic benefit, or similar circumstances that the reason had been granted. And I think Wagon Trail is the best example.
Right. Thank you for that.
Secretary Cornett?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the record, Todd Cornett. Yeah, and some of those other examples, council has moved away from a lot of reliance upon those kind of economic development reasons. So I think the Wagon Trail is the most analogous one. Some of the other ones, again, council had relied on those and then, has moved away from strategic investment program or just tax-based kinds of things. So those ones, I wouldn't say, if you just look at a straight sort of look at them, you could say economic development, it's inconsistent. In reality, it's not with those. But I think, as Chris mentioned, the Wagon Trail was the most analogous one.
And each one of these is very site specific. Okay, I think, Councilor Imes, did you have another question? Okay, so we're ready to proceed.
Thank you, Chair Howe. Thank you, Councilmember Imes. Yeah, and I'll just point out on that same note, what we specifically recommended in the proposed order was a partial reversal of the denial of this reason. We are recommending specifically that the projects that would be supported by the proposed agricultural mitigation fund are reasonably likely to generate a net economic benefit that benefits the local agricultural economy specifically. And we're recommending the council grant the local economic benefit reason based on that specifically. We're still recommending the council maintain the rejection of general economic benefits, including the job creation, revenue generation, and lease payments as a reason. And again, that is consistent with the order in Wagon Trail, the final order in Wagon Trail.
Councilor Byer.
Thank you. But just to make it clear that those other economic benefits that aren't directly related to mitigation of agricultural effects are considered in the EC analysis, how we weigh economic, social, environmental, and energy. Is that correct?
I believe so. So how the standard is worded, it's that we have to see that the consequences have been identified and addressed. And I believe, and I apologize if I'm misstating, but I believe in this proposed order, at least, we primarily interpret that to mean the negative consequences. And so these other types of economic benefits are we're not denying that they exist, or we're not saying that they're unsubstantiated. We're just saying they're not really relevant to this goal 3 exception because they're not really unique to the project one or directly tied to agriculture or
Yeah.
to the resource protected by the goal.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Thanks. So that was really I think the most complex issue that we had come up during the DPO hearing. The next issue was related to housing impacts. And as I mentioned, the county asked for the outcomes of the workforce housing plan that is proposed by the applicant to be prepared prior to construction in consultation with local economic development organizations and housing officials, that they just report the outcomes of that work to the county, partially, I think, to help the county learn and us also learn what strategies work and which don't, but also to get a scope of how the construction of these facilities is impacting housing, at least in Morrow County and the surrounding area. So the county specifically asked for the data to be reported in outcomes. The applicant responded that it supported that recommendation as long as the data was only reported in aggregate to protect worker privacy. And so we've essentially recommended changes to the conditions that are consistent with these requests. And if you can go to the next slide, I'll show the red line. So recommended public services condition 4, it's kind of hard to see on this slide. But essentially there was already a reporting requirement there, but we've added some specificity that was requested by the county in section A, which is specifically saying that we'd like to see data, including aggregate data on the location, like the city and the type of housing used by workers. So everything in aggregate, this would be included, this report would be included as part of the semi-annual construction progress report that's required for every facility, to kind of ease the flow of information that comes into our compliance team. And then I just wanted to point out in section B, we've added some additional organizations to the list of organizations that are recommended the applicant coordinate with, based on feedback from council member Imes. So yeah, if we didn't get those quite right, please do let me know, but I think that's consistent with what was suggested. And then on the next slide, thank you, Councilmember Imes. On the next slide, these are really just conforming changes to improve consistency in the wording between the two conditions, and then emphasize the need for ongoing coordination with the county officials and local groups. This is fun. Okay. So the next issue, if we're ready to move on, is related to the wildfire mitigation plans. As I mentioned, we received kind of 2 comments related to fire. The first was really tangentially related to fire, but we had comments raising concerns about potential use of lithium-ion battery technology for the proposed BESS. We reviewed those. We did not feel that the comments generally demonstrated that the use of lithium-ion batteries could not be done in a way that's consistent with council standards and the protection of public health and safety. But there was some information in the supporting documentation that came along with those comments about safety risks to first responders and the possibility that certain fire suppression methods might exacerbate a hazard caused by the things. And so we thought that was a good thing to include in the wildfire plans. And that kind of went along with the county's comments that there be additional coordination with the local emergency services managers. So we did, in response to the Tim Peaks Journal comments, we did make some changes specific to batteries. And then we also sent the proposed or the draft construction and operation wildfire mitigation plans to the county emergency service providers for comment before we issued the proposed order. And what we got back from them was just that they wanted better placarding and labeling of areas where hazardous materials would be stored and utilized for first responders. And so we did end up making some changes, not to conditions, but to the plans themselves. And if you could go to the next slide. Essentially asking for better identification and mapping of things that might be important to first responders, to fire responders, including primary access points, material storage areas, and battery components to the fire districts prior to construction and operation of the facility as those respective plans are finalized. And then second, there was already a requirement for annual training of first responders. And we just added on that those annual trainings should also specifically cover how to fight a fire involving BESS components to address the Tim Peaks Journal comments.
Counselor Byer.
So I really like the amendments to this condition for the better signage, the access marking, the training, and just moving forward with other projects. If we can incorporate these kind of conditions, because I think that goes a long way to address concerns of the local emergency managers. So kudos to staff for working on this one, but I think it's a good condition that we should carry forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Byer. I also don't think it's too much of an overshare to say that we are currently working on kind of template versions of wildfire plans that we can share with applicants who are in the process of developing their applications so they can adapt those for use. I'm not sure when those will be fully vetted and ready, but that is something that we are trying to prepare. And we're also, you know, I at least, and I know the other siting analysts are all encouraging developers to work with local fire districts and with the emergency service coordinators before they even come to us to try to get, you know, local concerns addressed in their application materials.
Sure, how?
Vice Chair Condon.
Just a quick question related, that I don't think we've discussed before. Just as you prepare something, is insurance harder and harder to come by? I mean, is there any consultation with insurance companies about what they might expect or want in a wildfire mitigation plan? I'm just wondering if that's an access to information from another group that is impacted by wildfire mitigation plans. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but
I'll mostly defer to Secretary Cornett and Patrick if they have differently. I personally have not seen any consultation with insurance companies. My understanding is that a lot of the insurers' concerns or desires would be incorporated both into the National Electric Safety Code, the underwriters' laboratory standards that are required for these, basically for these components to get on the market. And so I think a lot of that kind of happens in the industry before it gets to us. So I haven't done any consultation with insurers, but yeah.
thank you.
Okay, the final issue where we proposed recommended changes in the proposed order were related to concerns that weren't raised in public comments, but they were raised by the council during your review. And that was specifically regarding the adequacy of conditions to protect water resources in the Butter Creek critical groundwater area. And the council asked just for, I think, more concrete evidence demonstrating that the applicant was obtaining their construction water from a legal source, an authorized source, and then actually using that source during construction to meet all of their demand. So we've proposed some revisions to recommended water rights condition 1 and 2 to try to address that feedback. And and so specifically, I'll kind of describe these changes, but we moved away from the language that was saying agreements or similar conveyance, just to say that we need a contract or purchase agreement for water, because we felt that was a little more concrete. And that we wanted that documentation to demonstrate that adequate water supply to meet construction demand had been secured from sources with a valid water right. We get an estimate of construction water demand in the application. We would probably be looking for a true up if there was significant changes to the design of the facility. And that would come through section A that was already in the condition. And then in condition 2 on the next slide, we have the construction condition where we've added new language, specifically saying that they needed to use all water, appropriate and use all water in accordance with the applicable laws and rules of the Oregon Water Resources Department. That's something they already have to do, but it's easier if it's in the condition, just more visibility isn't harmful. And then that they would get a report, or we would get a report again in the semi-annual construction progress report on the source and amount of water used during each month of construction, and that the certificate holder maintain records adequate to substantiate those report and make such records available to the department upon request. I do want to point out that we had some conversations with council members that had asked us to go over this with them before the issuance of the proposed order. And there were some concerns that waiting for that first 6-month report would give a lot of time for something to go wrong. But we do anticipate that by requiring them to maintain records on site, or maintain records and make them available upon request. If one of our inspectors or compliance officers goes out to the site and feels that something may be off, they should be able to get that documentation as soon as we know there is a problem, or suspect there may be a problem, I should say. Great. So that is what I had to present for you. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it to you for your discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clark. That was a good presentation, summarizing everything. Questions from council?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor Devlin.
I hesitate to bring up this subject, but I'm probably not going to stop. When the concern was brought about lithium batteries, I think, to me, they are around us all the time. I have one in front of my garage. My neighbor has 3. And I don't have that level of concern, but while everybody was talking about it, I was just looking up some information, and I don't know what status this has relative to codes. I don't believe it is a code. But the National Fire Protection Association has a standard 855 standards for installation of batteries in energy storage facilities. And I was wondering if staff might look at that to see if anything is being incorporated into the codes that Oregon utilizes, the building codes, in terms of standards. I don't believe this is the same as actually like a building. It's a recommended standard, actually.
Yeah, thank you, council member Devlin. Because building codes are specifically something that's outside of the council jurisdiction, I think none of us are much of experts on this. I will note that my understanding is that the National Electric Safety Code tends to apply more directly, and it's the fire codes and building codes that get brought down to the state level.
Okay.
But I could be wrong on that, and I probably shouldn't
I mean, I was just
speculate
curious,
too much. So.
because the issue with large lithium storage, not that there's not issues with actually every type of storage, is that as one element goes bad, you can put that element will affect other elements because it's actually a series of batteries. And while you can put out the one, you still may have a discharge to the others that causes additional problems. And you could still have an incident hours later or days later. But I think inherently there are always risk issues with any types of facilities, storage or otherwise. But I just thought it's kind of interesting. There seems to be a vast amount of public information available on this. Not so much on the side of the risks or saying the risks are too high or whatever, but just in terms of parties that are addressing or trying to address these issues. So just want to put it on the record. But I think battery storage is here with us to stay.
Any other comments? Vice Chair Condon?
Chair, Cindy Condon for the record. And this is for Councillor Devlin. I guess if you're looking at that material, is it specific to lithium ion? Because my understanding, there is a thought that there's a different battery storage that's contemplated here. And is it strictly lithium ion?
This one was specifically to lithium ion, but I would guess that you could find issues with practically any kind of storage. The one that was commented on in terms of the change that's coming forward, I think that's on a different project. There were statements about that might be the alternative for storage, for large storage facilities, but that's probably, you'd have to have somebody who's knowledgeable in the area to comment on the comment. That may be more PR than actual substance.
But just following up on our conversation earlier, if we are going to get more background information on storage in general, that might be something to include in that. So, yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, and council members Condon and Devlin, one thing I can say is what was in the comments, and I think what the general understanding is that there is a risk of thermal runaway events associated with lithium-ion batteries where they can overheat and then start a fire, and that fire can propagate through other parts, and that's why they have to have an HVAC system where the other chemistries don't, because that risk isn't there. But there is still an inherent risk with any electrical equipment. So.
And Mr. Chair, just keep in mind, and on the record here, the last one that wants to see a problem like this is the owner of the facility. So most would be doing everything possible to prevent something like this from happening.
Okay, any other comments? Do we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
If, I move that the council issue a final order approving the Sunstone Solar Project application for site certificate, utilizing the proposed order as the basis for the final order and grant issuance of a site certificate.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And for discussion, I'd like to read some comments regarding the goal 3 reasons exception, like I've been doing recently. The goal 3 exception requirements set a high threshold to remove land from Oregon's finite agricultural inventory. The definition of farm use includes planting, growing, harvesting, and managing cropland and livestock to make a profit. Council indicated our concern about lowering the threshold for an exception that we would be held to in future applications. So I want to specify my reasoning, how the record justifies a goal 3 exception for this project. If you can bear with me for a couple of minutes, I'll elaborate. There's 3 categories of agricultural land: high value, arable, and non-arable. The LCDC solar rules were designed to incentivize development on non-arable lands, so the threshold for a successful application on non-arable land was lowered. I feel FSEC is likely to see more applications on arable lands, and council needs to be clear that we must have sound reasons for taking arable lands out of agricultural production. A goal 3 exception is required if it's more than 12 acres of the project will be sited on high-value farmland soils, or more than 20 acres of the project will be sited on arable soils. The Sunstone Solar Project exceeds both of these limitations, occupying 9,442 acres of land zoned for exclusive farm use and dryland wheat farming, all of which is interspersed with arable soils and high-value farmland throughout the site boundary. If the property is not already physically developed or irrevocably committed because of surrounding development, then the goal 3 rule allows the council to consider reasons to justify an exception to the statewide policy embodied in goal 3. And in this case, on the basis of 1, locational dependency, 2, agriculture related economic benefits, and 3, minimal impacts to other resources protected by council standards. So under 1, the locational dependency, the proposed site's locationally dependent because it would be located on existing transmission and transportation infrastructure and is co-located with other nearby energy facilities in a manner that allows for efficient use of existing infrastructure. And therefore, I find that locational dependency is one of the 4 reasons justifying a goal 3 exception. The site's also a water challenged land and would not impact irrigated crops. Therefore, I find the water challenge site is one of the 4 reasons justifying a goal 3 exception. As an economic benefit, agricultural related economic benefits to support local agricultural economy for the loss of up to 9,400 acres of dryland winter wheat farmland, the applicants propose an agricultural mitigation plan based on an economic impact analysis, which estimates the annual economic value of winter wheat production at the site. To compensate for the loss of winter wheat production, the applicant proposes to make a one-time payment of $1,179 per acre of farmland occupied by the facility to an agricultural mitigation fund, up to approximately $11.08 million for the anticipated 9,400 acre energy facility footprint. Based on the modeling provided in the analysis, the investments proposed in the agricultural mitigation plan would more than offset the negative adverse impacts that would result from the conversion of cultivated land for use by the proposed facility. I therefore find that the applicant used reasonable methods to estimate both the proposed adverse impacts of the proposed facility and the potential benefits of the proposed agricultural mitigation plan, and that the preponderance of evidence in the record supports the finding that the proposed agricultural mitigation plan will not only mitigate impacts, but are reasonably likely to generate a net economic benefit to the local agricultural economy that justifies why state policy in goal 3 should not apply. And lastly, the 4th reason, minimal impacts to other resource. Construction and operation of the proposed facility would be cited to avoid any sensitive environmental features, and the facility is not anticipated to have any significant adverse impacts on soils, wetlands, protected areas, water resources, fish and wildlife habitat and species, threatened and endangered species, scenic and aesthetic resources, and historic, cultural, and archaeological resources. The lack of sensitive resources within the proposed energy facility footprint is unique for the site of its size. The construction and operation of the facility would result in some impacts to cultural resources of significance to the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. However, the applicant has worked with the tribes to identify appropriate mitigation, and the tribes have indicated that their concerns have been addressed. I therefore find that impacts to other resources would be minimal. Therefore, I believe the council can find that 1, locational dependency, 2, the site's a water-challenged land, 3, the agricultural economic benefits, and 4, minimal impacts to other resources protected by council standards are 4 reasons that cumulatively justify taking an exception to the statewide policy embodied in Goal 3. Okay,
If I may just,
yes,
Patrick Rowe,
Council
DOJ.
Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. How we always appreciate it when you provide those comments. You did recite the 4 reasons that are stated in the proposed order. I'd just like to clarify the statement that you read. I take that to be a supplementation of what's in the proposed order, not necessarily.
Right.
Do you agree with what is
Yeah.
in the proposed order,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
No. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. I think we're ready for Secretary Cornett to call the roll.
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Richard Devlin,
Yes,
Ken Howe,
Yes,
Katie Imes.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
okay, thank you. The next item we have is, yeah. Yes, thanks, Mr. Clark. Public comment period. This time is reserved for the public to address the council regarding any item within council jurisdiction that's not otherwise closed for comment. Items closed for comment are the Mist Underground Natural Gas Storage Facility Amendment 13 draft proposed order and the Sunstone Solar Project draft proposed order and proposed order. In the agenda, we have set the amount of time for individual commenters at 7 minutes. Nancy, so we can determine if that's adequate or too much. How many comment cards and raised hands on the webinar and the phone do we have?
I have received no written comments, and at this time, there are no hands raised. So maybe we would just go ahead and remind everyone how to raise your hand. If you are participating on the webinar, there's a bottom window, a main window with a set of icons. Just click on that participant window and that will raise your hand. When you are finished making your comment, you can click that button again and it will lower your hand. If you are on the phone, press *3 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand, and then you will press it again, *3 to lower your hand.
While we're waiting to see if anybody on the webinar or phone is wanting to speak, is there anybody here that wants the opportunity to provide public comment? Okay. Not here and nothing online?
There are no hands
And no
raised.
phones. Okay. Well, we'll,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Secretary Cornett?
if you're done with that agenda item.
Yeah. Done with it.
So if I might propose a schedule modification.
Okay.
Or agenda modification, excuse me. Mr. Rowe wanted to provide an update on one of the Boardman Hemingway amendments, and I forgot that during my secretary report. So if we could take that time right now, I think that would be a good opportunity. We're still on target. I think we can go into a break and then still come back and then initiate the public hearing at 5:30 or thereabouts.
Sounds good. Mr. Rowe?
Just very quickly, you'll recall with regard to Boardman to Hemingway request for Amendment 1, there had been an appeal filed that was being entertained by the Circuit Court in Union County. That was Ms. Irene Gilbert had filed that, and she was appealing the council's denial of her request for a contested case. That was scheduled to go to trial this week, In late last month, Ms. Gilbert voluntarily withdrew that appeal. So, and the court has dismissed it. However, with regard to Boardman to Hemingway request for Amendment 2, which you'll recall there were a number of requests for contested case on that. You denied those requests and granted the amendment. Ms. Gilbert has filed an appeal of your denial of her request for a contested case on RFA 2. So that was just filed within the last several days, and that will be briefed. I don't have the exact dates on the top of my mind, but I know her brief is due within the next 10 days or so, and then the state will file its brief in response.
Councilor Byer.
Thank you. Is the appeal going to the circuit court again, or will it take the normal route to the Supreme Court?
So she has filed this appeal in the Supreme Court, but she, in the petition for review, she has said that she believes it should be entertained by the circuit court. And so that will be one of the first items to be addressed.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay, thank you, Councilor Rowe. I guess it's break time. We'll take, what do people want, 10 or 15?
Does the hearing start at 5:30?
Oh, wait, yeah, is it a time certain thing? Yeah, 5:30. We better make it 10. So we'll come back at 5:28. Okay, it's now 5:30 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting back from recess and continue on with the next agenda item, which is the Madras Solar Energy Facility Amendment 13, draft proposed order, public hearing. And it'll include an information portion provided by Senior Siting Analyst Chase McVeigh Walker, who will provide a brief overview of the agenda item and the request, and a public hearing in which I will serve as the presiding officer. Mr. McVeigh Walker, could you please proceed with the information portion of the agenda?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Howe. Vice Chair Condon, members of the council, for the record, my name is Chase McVeigh Walker, and I'm a senior siting analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. Tonight's agenda item D, is the public hearing on the draft proposed order for the Madras Solar Energy Facility request for Amendment 1. Next slide, thank you. For tonight's agenda item, I will start by providing an overview of the approved facility, the amendment request, and a summary of the draft proposed order recommendations. Following my presentation, Chair Howe, acting as the presiding officer, will provide an overview of the public hearing format, and then we'll start the hearing. During the hearing, the certificate holder will have an opportunity to provide comments on the record of the DPO. Following the certificate holder, members of the public and reviewing agencies will be given an opportunity to comment. Next, council will be provided an opportunity to comment on the record. Following council's comment opportunity, the certificate holder will be provided an opportunity to respond to any comments received. The record will close at the conclusion of the public hearing tonight, unless the certificate holder requests and is approved an extension to respond to comments received. Additionally, I wanted to note that the department received a public comment period extension request from the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon on Tuesday, which council will have to evaluate and vote on before the close of the record. I want to note that the extension request letter states that the tribe has contacted council for the site certificate holder and is authorized to state that the certificate holder does not oppose the extension request motion. Next slide, please. So this is a overview of the amendment request process. There are 6 major steps in the review of requests for an amendment to an existing site certificate. The first step is the preliminary request for amendment, which is the initial request for an amendment submitted by a certificate holder. On June 25th, 2024, the certificate holder submitted their preliminary request for amendment 1. After the preliminary request for amendment, the next step in the process is the submittal of a complete application or a complete request for amendment. The complete request for amendment was submitted to the department following the department deeming it complete on October 17th, 2024. The next step, the third step in the process, is where we are tonight, the department's issuance of a DPO, a draft proposed order. The draft proposed order is the department's initial recommendations to council on the requested amendment, including recommendations for amended site certificate conditions. The department issued its draft proposed order on October 18th, 2024, and concurrently issued a public notice that initiated a 27-day public comment period that is to conclude tonight at the end of the public hearing. Following the conclusion of the record at a subsequent council meeting, council will review the draft proposed order and any and all comments received on the record. After council has reviewed the draft proposed order, the department will prepare its proposed order, which is the 4th step in the process up here. The proposed order incorporates comments received on the record of the draft proposed order and the department's draft responses to those comments. Once the proposed order is prepared, the department will issue a public notice of the proposed order and possible contested case. The proposed order, again, is staff's revised recommendations based on the comments received on the record of the DPO. The 5th step in the process is the possible contested case, and I want to note that only those persons who raised a relevant issue in person at the public hearing tonight or in writing by the comment deadline on the draft proposed order may request a contested case. The contested case process step is run by an independent hearing officer. And then the last step in this process is the final order. At this step, council reviews the department's proposed order or the hearing officer's proposed contested case order if there is a contested case, and issues a final order either approving or denying the request for amendment. If approved, council will also issue an amended site certificate. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide is an overview of the approved Madras Solar Energy Facility. The approved but not yet constructed facility includes 63 megawatts of solar photovoltaic energy generation to be located within an approximate 284 acre site boundary. The facility is located in Jefferson County, approximately 5 miles west of the city of Madras. And on this image, on this slide, there's a red arrow pointing to the facility site boundary, which is that yellow polygon west of the city of Madras. The certificate holder is Madras PV1 LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of Ecoplexus Incorporated. And the council issued the site certificate for this facility on July 16th, 2021. This next slide is a more detailed representation of facility layout and facility components. The solar facility components approved at the facility include solar modules, steel posts, power conversion stations that consist of inverters and transformers, cabling, and all of those solar components are represented as the yellow diagonal cross-hatched area within the site boundary on the screen. There are approved and related supporting facility components also, and those include battery energy storage system, which you can't tell very well on this screen, but they're proposed as the peppered small teardrop shapes throughout the facility boundary there. That's the battery energy storage system. There's also 34.5 kilovolt collector lines, 200 feet, approximately 200 feet of 230 kilovolt transmission line. There's a substation and a switching station, which in this figure is represented as that green box in the north half of the central north half. Thank you, Nancy, of the site boundary. An operation and maintenance building, which is directly adjacent to that substation, and it's like a little speck very near the yellow transmission line that transects the facility site boundary. Access, perimeter, and service roads, perimeter fencing, and temporary construction areas. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, yeah, not, okay. Also represented on this image is a yellow line that transects the facility site boundary. That yellow line is a built existing 230 kilovolt transmission line. It's the Pelton to Round Butte Dam transmission line, which is the transmission line the facility has proposed to interconnect into. Next slide, please. So what is being requested with this amendment? Well, the certificate holder requests a 3-year extension to both the construction commencement and completion deadlines. This change would make the new construction commencement deadline June 25th, 2027, and a new completion deadline 18 months after construction commences. As of the start of tonight's meeting, the department had received 5 written comments on the record of the DPO. 4 of the comments were provided by reviewing agencies and 1 from the certificate holder. This slide provides a brief summary of the comments received, which have all been provided to council prior to the meeting tonight, and were included and incorporated as attachment 2 to the staff report as found on the department's website. Staff report for agenda item D. The comment from the State Historic Preservation Office appears to be an auto-generated email assigning a case number for the review of the amendment request. The Oregon Department of State Lands commented that the wetland delineation for this facility expired earlier this year. However, there were no jurisdictional wetlands or waterways within the project study area. The Oregon Department of Agriculture's comment was that they had no comments for this amendment request and stated that there are no listed plants known to occur in Jefferson County. The certificate holders' comments included the transmittal of 2 different letters, one from the Deschutes Valley Water District and the other from Jefferson County Fire and EMS, Emergency Management Services. And lastly, as I mentioned near the beginning of my presentation, we received a comment letter from the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon requesting an extension to the public comment period. Next slide, please. Okay. Now I'll go over an overview of the DPO. In the draft proposed order, the department recommends council find that the changes proposed in request for amendment 1 would not necessitate any new or amended site certificate conditions for the standards listed on this slide. And as such, I don't intend on tonight, at least, going into any more detail of any of these standards. That said, if there are anything you as council would like to ask me, you're very much welcome to. Okay, next slide, please. This next set of 4 standards in the DPO, the department has recommended amended site certificate conditions, but the recommended amendments to the conditions are generally standardized changes based on the scope of this amendment request, the scope being a construction commencement and completion extension. And further details of the recommended amended site certificate conditions are provided in the staff report for this agenda item. And unless you have any specific questions on these 4 standards, I'll move on to my next slide.
Vice Chair Condon.
Thank you, Cindy Condon, for the record. Chase, I will have questions for that site certificate holder. Just regarding the organizational expertise. And maybe after they speak, maybe I'll have follow-up, but I think I'll be able to ask the site certificate holder. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair Condon. Well, feel free to interject if you think of anything or, yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the next 2 slides are standards that had more substantial recommended changes. First being the public services standard. For the public services standard, the department recommends council impose a new condition, public services condition 5. This recommendation is consistent with recent council direction and site certificate conditions. Recommended public services condition 5 would require that the certificate holder identify all water related needs and estimate daily annual water demand for each construction phase as applicable, as well as provide the department with evidence that demonstrates that adequate water supply, that there is adequate water supply to meet construction demand. And that demonstration could be the evidence there needs to be evidence that adequate water supply to meet construction demand has been secured and legally obtained by service providers or third party permits. Included in attachment 2 to the agenda item staff report, which I provided council yesterday, was the letter the certificate holder provided from the Deschutes Valley Water District, which indicates their ability and willingness to serve the water needs of Ecoplexus during construction and operation. The department's initial evaluation of the letter is that the letter itself doesn't constitute a change in the recommended new public services condition 5. Although the letter provides evidence that the certificate holder could get water from the water district for construction related activities, it doesn't confirm that they have water for the construction related activities. The second recommended condition amendment the department recommends in the DPO is the deletion of public services condition 4 from the site certificate. The requirements of this condition are based on representations made by the certificate holder in the application for site certificate itself relating to the development and implementation of an emergency contingency plan for construction and operation. In July 2022, the wildfire prevention and risk mitigation standard was adopted by council approximately almost to the day, a year after council's review and approval of this site certificate. So when the department evaluated the wildfire standard when reviewing this request for amendment, we determined that the substantive elements of Public Services Condition 4 would be better incorporated and implemented in the construction wildfire mitigation plan. My next slide will provide additional details on the department's evaluation of the wildfire standard. Next slide, please. Okay. So as I just mentioned, the wildfire prevention and risk mitigation standard was adopted after the facility was approved. A summary of the key findings made by the department in the draft proposed order regarding the wildfire standard is that approximately 13% of the site boundary has a very high overall fire risk rating, and approximately 40% of that includes, or 40% includes a high overall risk fire rating. Areas within the site boundary with heightened wildfire risk and high fire consequence areas are the areas with existing infrastructure, including transmission lines, like the existing Pelton Dam to Round Butte 230 kilovolt transmission line, roads and residences, and that the Jefferson County 2020 Community Wildfire Protection Plan indicates that the facility site is located within a high wildfire risk area, but that high wildfire risk area is the lowest risk on their scale. In an ongoing effort to refine wildfire mitigation plans, the department did, in the evaluation of the standard, coordinate with the local fire department and emergency management agencies to understand the best procedures to follow in the event of an emergency, as well as appropriate equipment to maintain on site. And with that evaluation, the department and the DPO recommends for wildfire prevention and risk mitigation conditions, new conditions. Conditions 1 and 2 would ensure the finalization and implementation of a construction wildfire mitigation plan. The construction wildfire mitigation plan has tasks and actions associated with finalizing the mitigation plan, pre-construction tasks, and tasks and actions that must be implemented during construction of the facility. Wildfire prevention and risk mitigation conditions 3 and 4 are recommended new conditions to ensure the finalization and implementation of an operational wildfire mitigation plan. And these plans, the construction wildfire mitigation plan and the operational wildfire mitigation plan, are included in the draft proposed order as attachments F1 and F2, I believe. Or, yeah. Next slide, please. So the staff's recommendation to council in the draft proposed order is to find that, based on a preponderance of the evidence on the record, the certificate holder has demonstrated that the proposed changes of the request for Amendment 1 would comply with the applicable laws and council standards, and that the site certificate may be amended as requested. Next slide, please. This slide describes the contested case proceeding for an amendment request. A contested case is not a mandatory step in the amendment process. In order for an issue to justify a contested case proceeding, it must raise a significant issue of fact or law that is reasonably likely to affect the council's determination that a standard is not met. When reviewing requests for a contested case, the council has 3 options. hold the contested case if they believe an issue raised would reasonably likely affect their determination that a standard was met, or remand the proposed order back to the department to make changes to conditions or findings regarding a raised issue, or deny the request because it did not meet one of the threshold requirements. There is a 10-minute YouTube video describing the differences between a contested case in an application versus an amendment on the department's web page. A link to this video was also provided in the October 18th public notice of tonight's hearing. And with that, I will conclude my portion of agenda item D, and we'll hand it over to Chair Howe, the presiding officer for the public hearing.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then. This is the public hearing on the draft proposed order on the request for Amendment 1 for the Madras Solar Energy Facility. I, Kent Howe, FSEC Chair, am serving as a presiding officer for this hearing. Today is November 14th, 2024. The time is 5:54 p.m. This public hearing is being held at an energy facility siting council meeting in person at the Inn at Cross Keys Station in Madras. This hearing is also being held via a WebEx webinar with a call-in option for those who cannot participate in person or via webinar. Tonight's hearing is being recorded. The presentations, written comments, oral testimony are part of the decision record for the amendment request for the facility. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public, the reviewing agencies, the council, and the certificate holder, if they wish to do so, to present oral and written testimony on the request and the department's draft proposed order. The 27-day public comment period on the draft proposed order is scheduled to close at the conclusion of tonight's public hearing. So, Nancy, could you put up the, there you go. So pursuant to OAR 345-027-0, whoops, go back one. That one, okay, sorry. Pursuant to OAR 345-027-0367, sub 5, A and B, please note the following. A person who intends to request a contested case on the proposed order for a site certificate amendment must comment in person or in writing on the record of the public hearing. And a person who intends to raise an issue that may be the basis for granting a contested case proceeding must raise that issue on the record of the public hearing with sufficient specificity to afford the council, the department, and the certificate holder an adequate opportunity to respond to the issue. To raise an issue with sufficient specificity, a person must present facts on the record of the public hearing that support the person's position on the issue. Okay, next slide. This slide presents the order for tonight's hearing and testimony on the record of the DPO. First, the certificate holder, then members of the public, then members of the council, and finally, the certificate holder will be allowed to respond to any comments. I'll call on each person interested in providing oral testimony, starting with the certificate holder, and then members of the public here in person, and then on the webinar, and then on the phone. And then the testimony slide, there it is. For any individuals wishing to provide oral testimony during tonight's hearing, for the record, please state the following with your testimony. Full name with spelling, name of organization or group if you're representing one, and physical mail or email address. If you do not wish to provide your mailing or email address in this format, you may provide it to Chase McVeigh Walker. If you do not provide contact information, we'll be unable to send you the notice of the proposed order and the opportunity to request a contested case. So is a certificate holder here tonight and do they wish to provide testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Come on forward and
Let's turn this on.
let's turn it on.
It's on.
Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Paul Shepshikowski. My email address, Chase has it, so that's available, as well as my mailing address. I am a senior director of permitting for Ecoplexus, and I'm here representing the certificate holder, Madras PV1 LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ecoplexus. We appreciate your consideration of this amendment request. I wanted to make note that I do have with me one of my staff members as well as one of my consultants, Carrie Andrews, from Tetra Tech, in case there's questions that they might be able to answer. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. I did want to mention, hearing Chase, we do intend to meet all the conditions of the wildfire mitigation that have been proposed. They all seem very reasonable. And as far as finalizing a contract with Deschutes Valley Water District, it's certainly something we plan to do. It's just that, again, we're not quite ready to go to construction. So that's pending. Other than that, thank you again.
Any questions from council?
Oh, can you put them up?
Yeah. Councilor Condon.
Oh,
Councilor Devlin. Councilor Devlin, go ahead.
Yes, very quickly, Mr. Chairman. You have seen the request for an extension of time from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Do you have any objections to that request?
No, we do not. No objections.
Thank you.
And then I had provided just a couple of site photos from last week, just showing that, your concerns about fire are reasonable. The site had burned this last August, so there's basically not much left on the site currently. So that's all I had.
Okay, Vice Chair Condon.
thank you, and thank you so much for being here. I just have a question, it's more for information.
Sure.
Just
Go ahead.
background information, just related to the time when first applied for construction was supposed to start and whatever. And the interconnections seem to be the biggest factor. I don't know if that's
Sure.
correct.
No, that's part of it.
But can you tell us what that process is? Like from the time the site application was approved, the time necessary and the relationship between the Confederated Tribes and PGE and how that works and affects timing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best resource, and I can give you an answer in writing if you need more specificity, but in general, it's been complicated. It is a process. There are negotiations going between the two, PGE and the tribes and Ecoplexus, that have been complicated. Part of it is because of the 230 kV line that we interconnect is under the jurisdiction of FERC, which also adds another level of complexity. But I'd say that's really one of the main reasons that I see for the extension request. But I think my impression of things, and I'm not at the top levels of those negotiations, but my impression is those negotiations are moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And then and just a question on the structure of the company with Ecoplexus and then Fresh Air and then Madras. And can you explain that in terms of liability or why the changes after?
Yeah, again, I can provide you something from our attorney who would probably have a better answer than I would. But basically, Ecoplexus, this is normal, that they have a holding company,
Mhm.
they have a certificate holder. There is a liability protection issue that plays into that. But all the expertise and the parent company is Ecoplexus. So all the staff, all our engineering team, all our operations and maintenance, all of, everybody basically working on the projects at the certificate holder level are Ecoplexes.
And thank you, and I realize that just by going through the information. But one of the things I kind of struggle with is we have a site certificate holder, and then we know Ecoplexis is really doing the work and providing the resources. And as a parent company, I would imagine can decide, there are a lot of projects you have out there and can decide, okay, this one is going to be done faster and affect the timing of any individual project. And so what I'm trying to figure out is the protection the LLC provides between Ecoplexis and Madras. And if that's part of what can affect timing is the decisions about what projects to develop at certain times.
Maybe, but I think most decisions about timing really have to do with interconnection.
Okay, and
And
obviously,
that ends up being one of the main factors rather than the rest of this that you're talking about.
okay. And just one more follow-up question on that with respect to FERC, and that is a more complicating aspect of it. Is the timing for FERC, just given the activity in interconnections now, is there timing? Does that add a year? Is there something you're looking forward to in timing or expecting in timing?
I think that's part of what the negotiations are ongoing right now,
Okay,
is to work through FERC as quickly as possible.
okay, all right. Thank you. And again, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
Any other comments or questions from council? Secretary Cornett.
I may, well, you're still up here. So the time extension request. So in the letter by the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, they requested a 21-day comment extension or at a minimum 11 days. So just running kind of the math on that, 11 days would be the 25th of November, and then the 21 days would be the 5th of December. So just so you know, we have a production cycle for council meetings, based on when the record closes would be their time extension request, however long that is. And then if you want any comment period after that, that then has the potential to impact sort of when the council is going to review the draft proposed order. So it could then result in, with 11 days, I think December is probably fine. With 21 days, it's not going to be in December. It would be January likely. So just with that in mind, do you have any thoughts on those two kind of timeframes before we get to public comment period? And then before that concludes, the council will evaluate and vote on that request. But I wanted to make sure that you've thought through that and understand that fully.
Absolutely. I think I would default to what the tribe's interest is and what works best for them. I think we're open to.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So before I open the public hearing or the hearing for public testimony, I want to remind the public that prior to the close of the record, you may submit written testimony in a variety of ways. Comment portal, email, and handing in your written comment tonight. As noticed in the agenda, the duration of the time for individual commenters will be 7 minutes, but I would like to get a sense of the number of people interested in testifying to determine if I need to adjust that time limit. For those in the room, please raise your hands if you intend to testify. Got one, okay. And then Nancy, is there anybody on the WebEx? Please use the raise your hand feature. And for those on the phone, please push *3.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Well, looks like we're not going to have time constraints here. So are there individuals in the room who have provided a public comment card?
Yes, we have Alan Clark.
Okay, Mr. Clark, come on forward and give us your comments. State your name and address, please.
My name's Alan Clark. Address is 1220 Northeast Dogwood Lane, Madras, Oregon.
Okay.
And I was just going to speak, we're the landowners out there. We own the property that this sighting's on. And we were in favor of it, not only because it's ours, but it's a big help, but for one, they've owned the property's been in the family since the 1930s. And so it's been it was farmed for several years, dryland wheat. It's never had water on it. It's kind of just a piece of scrap ground basically. And so it's a perfect location for the siting of that. And that's about all I have to say. I just think it's a really good spot for it. There's not very much wildlife out there on top up there. As far as I'm concerned, it'll preserve the ground for another 25 or 30 or 40 years until the solar goes out, and then the ground will still be there without houses on it, and so it'll preserve that for years to come.
Okay,
So I think that's all I've got to say.
thank you very much. Any comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Still no star threes or hands on the WebEx or the phone. So the council received a 21-day extension request for the public comment period from the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon. Council needs to determine if there's good cause in justifying an extension to the public comment timeframe. And
Darrell, if
yeah,
I may.
yeah.
Normally you do apply a good cause standard when you review these. You don't have any rules, as we have discussed as recently as last month's meeting, that govern how you handle requests for time extensions. You have defaulted to applying a good cause standard. However, this situation is different than you have been presented with previously, in that the certificate holder has consented to the request. The idea behind a lot of our deadlines are, we want certificate holders or applicants to be able to rely on our process. And they have certain expectations as far as, how quickly the process will play out. And oftentimes these projects are time sensitive. In this instance, because the certificate holder has consented, you could decide to approve without going through your normal good cause analysis. That's at your discretion.
Secretary Cornett.
Thank you. For the record, Todd Cornett, if I may, just real quick. So the motion, you have two sets of motion language, one to approve it for good cause, one to deny it for lack of good cause. Just a sort of a recommendation is whoever makes the motion, if you're intending to approve the 21-day time extension request, you can eliminate the good cause portion of the motion language. Because again, the certificate holder has consented.
Right. Okay. Councilor Devlin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd be prepared to make a motion anytime, and I agree we don't need to do the good cause, but when you consider the fact that the basic amendment is to delay the start time until June 2027, and the fact that there's agreement between the certificate holder and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, I don't see any
Warm
necessity
Springs.
to stay on a strict
Sorry,
timeline.
Councilmember Devlin, it's the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs.
I'm sorry, Confederated, I'd get in trouble for that in the legislature. The Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. They even wrote it down.
Okay, yes. I think we're ready for a motion. Counselor Devlin?
Mr. Chair, I move the council approve the request by the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon for an extension of the public time frame to December 5th, it's approximately 21 days, based on the request from a sovereign entity and the fact that the amendment itself is based on a request for extension of time to start the project in as late as June of 2027.
Can I clarify at 5 PM?
Yeah.
December 5th at
On
5 PM.
December 5th, right.
Yes, 5 PM.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I consider that a friendly amendment. Or friendly.
Okay,
With the parliamentary, I don't have that ability.
yeah. So we have a motion with a friendly amendment. Do we have
Or
a
a friendly
second?
suggested amendment, which I agree to.
Chair Howe.
Counselor Byer.
I would second that motion with added language that the applicant has agreed to the extension so that we distinguish this request from others. Thank you.
Does that need a friendly amendment? Or is that
That's fine.
request? Okay. We have a
I can make the
motion.
adjustment to the motion language accordingly.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Secretary Cornett, could you please call the roll?
Katie Imes,
Yes.
Richard Devlin,
Yes,
Ken Howe,
Yes.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Ann Byer.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we've moved beyond the requested extension request. And are there any council members that would like to provide comments to the department or the certificate holder? Okay, seeing none, as previously stated, the public comment period ends at the close of the hearing tonight. However, if requested by the certificate holder, the council may grant additional time to respond.
Go back.
Oh,
Mr. Chair, we still have the, any response by the certificate holder, and I think the certificate holder needs to come up because we need to ask them how much time they would like to be able to respond
good.
to the comments submitted by the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs.
Okay, yes. And again, name and just name will do.
Paul Shevchikowski.
Okay.
We would like to have enough time to respond to whatever the tribe presents. So probably a week after their comment period.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
You can be conservative. I mean, this is really your opportunity. So
Sure.
I don't want to tell you what your needs are. You can say, a month, and then it can be a day, and that's fine. So essentially when you get it to us is the time that sort of will stop, that clock will stop. So it'll be probably as late as, but based on the idea that when you do submit your comments, then everything will stop there. The record will close based on your submittal of that comment or the response to us, and then we'll move forward to the next step. So you don't know what's going to be submitted, so you should be conservative, because if you say 1 week, it's going to be 1 week. If you say 2 weeks and then you submit it in 1 week, it'll stop at 1 week.
But the comment period remains open for,
Not the comment, so
it's just our.
the record remains open.
The
The
record.
comment period will
Oh, I see.
close at 21 days. And just for clarity, and I don't think we clarified this, the comment period is extended for everybody, not just the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. It's a general kind of extension of comment timeframe. So somebody else may submit comments as well. We won't do another notice, but we will make note of that on the website of the public comment period extension. So you should be as conservative as you think you need to be. And then again, whenever you get those comments to us, that stops.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
the record stops.
Thank you for that clarification. On that note, I would probably request a month
to close the record. So I'm just
After
looking at
December
the,
5th.
I'm just looking at the, so December 5th, so that would be, yeah, 4 weeks would then be the January 2nd at 5 PM.
That's fine.
Okay, again, we won't hold you to that. If it's earlier, that's fine with us. The record will close when you submit.
Okay.
Okay, so we're closing the hearing,
We're closing the hearing.
leaving the record open
We're,
for,
we're- we're leaving both the public comment period,
and the.
and the
record.
record by nature, but
Okay.
then the public
until-
comment period will close on December 5th at 5 PM. The record will remain open as late as January 2nd, or until, if earlier, the certificate holder submits their response. And just a reminder, your ability is only to respond to comments that were submitted. Today was the day for you to provide comments. If you disagree with anything on the draft proposed order, that was for today. So anything that you do can only be limited to responses to comments that are received.
Okay. Fair enough.
Clear?
It is. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, I'll see if I get this right and you correct me if I don't. So it's now 6:19 PM on November 14th, 2024, and the public hearing is closed on the draft proposed order for the request for Amendment 1 of the Madras Solar Energy Facility. However, the public comment period will close on December 5th at 5 PM. And the applicant has until January 2nd at 5 PM for a response to any comments that come in.
But with the caveat that the record, and that's when the record will close unless they submit their responses earlier than that.
Yeah, right. Okay. That closes things up, I think, for this item and actually the meeting. So the hearing's closed. Any other comments for good of the order?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Counselor Devlin.
just a clarification, the meeting on the 13th, I think it's the 13th, will be in Salem.
I believe it's the 14th,
Or
I'm sorry, maybe it's the 13th. Sorry, let me check.
It's
Yes,
13th.
you are correct, Councilmember Devlin. It is the 13th and it will be in Salem.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, the time is now 6:21 PM and the November 14th, 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council is now adjourned.
Thank you. Right on.
Yeah, you did it.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, good night.